the experience of stuttering is not a monolith. It's quite a heterogeneous community. And so we're going to have different perceptions as a community about whether it's a disability, and especially with the medical model versus social model discussions in the broader disability movement, and all of that going on.
Welcome to Some Stutter Law, a podcast by the Communication Collaborative. Some Stutter Law is Newfoundland and Labrador's first podcast about living with communication disorders. We speak directly to people living with speech and language disorders and others such as speech language pathologists, researchers, educators, family members, and allies. We use inclusive language and themes to help rebuild confidence and hope by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers. My name is Greg O'Grady, and I am a person who stutters and host of Some Stutter Law. Some Stutter Law mission is dismantling and rebuilding communication disorders. Let's start listening. Our mandate is, in the spirit of Newfoundland and Labrador humor, robust and frank interactive discussions. Some Stutter Law podcast aims to rebuild confidence and hope for people who live with communication disorders by dismantling myths, stigma, stereotypes, and barriers. Some Stutter Law podcast objectives are raising awareness, education, understanding, acceptance of communication disorders by providing support, current information, research, and resources. Raising awareness that communication disorders can impact a person's life emotionally, educationally, physically, socially, and vocationally. Creating a safe space where guests can be themselves without fear of being judged. Today, Some Stutter Law welcomes 3 representatives from the Stuttering Scholarship Alliance, SSA for short. The Stuttering Scholarship Alliance is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to improving a bridge to access for people who stutter, otherwise facing barriers of access, to achieve their fullest potential and receive effective speech therapy. Stuttering Scholarship Alliance provides scholarships to both speech therapists and persons who stutter. Today we have Nathan Malapati with us. Nathan is founder and CEO of Stuttering Scholarship Alliance, a nonprofit organization that tackles a critical issue in the field of speech therapy regarding its lack of access to low-income communities. He also serves on leadership teams for several international speech disability awareness organizations. Nathan has conducted both cell biology and public policy research at UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine and the Lucan School of Public Affairs. As a senior policy intern for the City of Los Angeles Department on Disability, Nathan developed transformative public policy initiatives that created jobs for the thousands of unemployed or homeless persons with disabilities in Los Angeles. Nathan aspires to a career as a physician, researcher, policy maker focusing on improving the quality of care and reducing the disparities for disabled persons in healthcare systems. He will attend medical school next year to pursue a medical degree. Some Stutter Law also welcome today Dr. Nicole Belka, COO. Dr. Belka is a pharmacist by trade and in his day job serves as a national program manager for the Emergency pharmacy services at the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States. Despite discovering he stuttered in the second grade, he never fully participated in any formal speech therapy until his mid-30s. Finding SSA has enlightened a new path forward for him on his journey towards acceptance. We also welcome Jenny McGuire. Jenny is the executive director of SSA. Jenny is a person who stutters and a vociferous advocate for the stuttering community. Jenny earned a BA in philosophy from Georgetown University and an MA in art therapy from George Washington University. Jenny worked as an art therapist with pediatric hematology and oncology patients and their families at Georgetown University Hospital Lombardi Cancer Center. Jenny's journey as a stutterer has been marked by many different speech therapy experiences. Most of these therapies taught her behaviors intended to mask her stutter. Spoiler: these tricks never worked when she needed them most, but did little to address the spate of adverse cognitive and affective effects of stuttering. So true, Jenny, so true. Arts Arts avoidance reduction therapy for stuttering with Vivian Siskin changed the trajectory of Jenny's life. Through arts group therapy, Jenny learned that a distinction can be drawn between the problem of stuttering and the act of stuttering. Having some disfluencies when she spoke was not ruining her life, but her avoidance of stuttering, along with constant negative thoughts and feelings about stuttering, sure were. And I admit to that, having a history of being a covert stutterer. Through hard work doing the things she didn't want to do and leveraging the loving support of a wonderful group therapy community, Jenny climbed out of the darkness that is the problem of stuttering. After becoming a mother, Jenny was privileged to make the choice to leave the workforce and spend a decade focusing on raising her children. Now that her children are both school age and flying the coop for 7 hours a day, congratulations, she could not be more thrilled to join SSA as executive director and to play a part in driving SSA's noble mission forward. The alliance aspect of SSA touches the part of her that knows that everything is more tolerable and manageable within the context of a supportive community. And she looks forward to connecting stutterers with their people so that they may continue to thrive in the long term. Jenny is humbled by the steadfast dedication and SSA's many volunteers bring to this work. The organization simply would not function without their drive, passion, and tireless effort. So, welcome to Some Stutter Law today. As I'm smiling now because after reading each of your bios, I came up with a number of questions. Then I thought to myself, from these questions I have based on your bios, Some Stutter Law can easily do a separate Some Stutter Law episode to do a later episode, and then do a later episode on uh, the SSA itself. But we'll see how things go.
Great.
So Nathan, I'm going to start with you first. I'm going to ask some personal questions of the three of you, and then we'll move into the SSA. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Nathan, in your bio, you state that as a founder and CEO of SSA, you tackle a critical issue in the field of speech therapy regarding this lack of access to low-income communities. Given this challenge, how do you get the attention of levels of government to place stuttering under their priority lens, the need for funding and services?
Yeah. That's a great question, Greg. First of all, thank you so much for having us. I've been a fan of your podcast for a little while since you had my mentor on it, Dr. McGuire, and thank you so much for your kind words as well. One thing I want to mention is I probably should update my bio at the end. It says I'm planning on going to medical school. I'm actually in medical school now, so that's a small change. But yeah, to address your question, so it's probably easiest to talk more broadly about SSA in general first. So all of us here are people who stutter, and I'm sure many of the listeners are as well. And the one thing about my own personal stuttering experience growing up and even today in medical school is that the true impact of stuttering is really in that fear of stuttering. It's something that all of us believe at SSA. And growing up, it's when you face those microaggressions every day, micro or macroaggressions every day, that increased my anxiety growing up, that actually worsened my stutter, and it made me stutter more, and it just became a vicious cycle that was so hard to break. And unfortunately, the only help I got at a young age was speech therapy in my local schools, who are amazing people, right? These were just wonderful women who wanted to help me with my stuttering, but they just didn't have the training, the expertise in stuttering. So I'm in medical school, right? I'm getting this education on all sorts of diseases and conditions, from acute kidney injury to a cardiovascular disease. But I would kid myself if I said I could do a coronary artery bypass surgery right now. And that's the analogy I like to use in stuttering, in that the treatment of stuttering is so specific. It requires somebody who is specialized, who really understands the condition. And unfortunately, anyone else who does it oftentimes is actually hurting the client and the person who stutters. And that problem, this supply and demand gap, how there are so many people who stutter, millions of people who stutter, 5% of all children, 1% of all adults, and so few people who actually understand this complexity of stuttering. Like, the best metric on the supply side that we have is the fluency board, the ASHA fluency board in the US. And according to that board, there's only about 150 people who specialize in stuttering. So it's just a tremendous gap. And that was the real impetus for starting SSA. And we've broadened it since then in terms of focusing on access to both speech therapy and community services. But to answer your question, I think the way that governments, local, state, and federal, see stuttering right now is they fit it underneath this broader realm of speech therapy. Meaning, if you're a child who stutters, there has to be a speech therapist at your local public school, and so you are taken care of. And that's a erroneous assumption, and that's the assumption policymakers are making every day right now. And by that, almost that small assumption that they are making at the legal level, they are ruining millions of lives of children around the world, because these children, policymakers, they're not only not getting the help that they deserve, but everybody at the high levels of government education thinks that they are providing those services. So we, as advocates, as people who stutter, we have to change that paradigm, and we have to tell the policymakers and government that, hey, the help in schools actually, one, is not helping, and two, if you ask a lot of people who stutter, it's making them worse in many ways, just because of the way therapy requires specialized training for people who stutter. And once we're able to show that and articulate that in large numbers, we can really start to push for more legislation reform in terms
Mhm.
of targeting kids in schools and supporting them with specialists in stuttering who know what they're doing, and also tackling the insurance issue, which is the health insurance. It doesn't cover
Mhm.
private stuttering therapy.
Mhm.
So I hope that
Mhm.
answers the question in terms of the role of government. But it starts here, right? It starts with us, advocates
Mhm.
for people who stutter, and I truly believe that like together we can make that change.
Mhm. Nathan, you made a good point about the specializing in stuttering. I was surprised that the more that the Newfoundland Labrador Stuttering Association, as well as the some sort of law, speak to speech language pathologists. I was surprised when I heard at one point that when I asked, "Do you specialize in speech and stuttering?" The SLPs in our area in Newfoundland, they cannot say that they specialize. They you know they have an interest, which is very confusing for especially when people are looking for specialists in stuttering. So this is a challenge. I think it's something that we have to deal with or address down the road. Nathan, another question for you. Uh, you mentioned that you serve on leadership teams for several international disability awareness organizations. Given that people who stutter have a 50-50 perspective whether or not stuttering can be considered a disability, what are your thoughts? Because this is an ongoing, uh, I guess, a different ways of thinking. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, my answer, Greg, will always be on the side of people who stutter. Right. I really want to empower people who stutter, and I want to acknowledge that the experience of stuttering is not a monolith. It's quite a heterogeneous community. And so we're going to have different perceptions as a community about whether it's a disability, and especially with the like medical model versus social model discussions in the broader disability movement, and all of that going on. So regardless of my personal feelings, I don't think that one particular classification should ever be forced onto people. Um, we really want to empower people who stutter. Now, I will say that as of today in the U.S., it is on the ADA. It's in the Americans with Disabilities Act amendments of 2008. Um, and there are advantages of being listed in that law in terms of resources and influence in government by working with other like disability awareness organizations to push for change for people who stutter at the policy level. So going back to that like last question, um,
Hmm.
but again, just highlighting that this experience is so different for so many people who stutter that like they should really make that choice on their own whether they consider
Mhm.
themselves to be disabled on that
Mhm.
individual level. And then the last
Mhm.
point I'll make is another aspect about SSA that we are all passionate about is this idea of treating stuttering as a journey, and the fact that there is no one type of person who stutters, and that's what I truly believe is missing in a lot of solutions out there for people who stutter, because just speech therapy is not the answer for everybody, right? It might not work for everybody, but for a lot of people, it will work great. For some people, a community might be better, right? For some people, something else might be better. So
Mhm.
the more we can develop solutions to meet people who stutter where they are, the better. And that's kind of the direction that we are going as an organization, trying to find innovative ways to use technology to empower people who stutter and to meet them where they are. I know Jenny and Nicole and Nikhil have strong thoughts about this as well. So definitely, if you two want to jump in, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I would echo what Nathan said in that stuttering, while we share so many common aspects of our experience, is very heterogeneous. And even in a person's lifetime, I know in the past, the anxiety I had that accompanied stuttering, I felt functionally disabled for a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just my stuttering, it was my stuttering and my feelings about stuttering reacting with the world. And so I just agree that people who stutter should be allowed to tell those around them if they want to be classified as disabled or not. I think objectively, there's a continuum, and sometimes in this stuttering experience, you feel disabled and other times you don't. And so I think we should trust people about their own experience.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think that there's kind of been a taboo about stuttering being a neurological condition, because that's hard to say, especially as a parent, if your child is experiencing that. That's not something that you kind of want to reckon with. And the effects of stuttering that happens over a course of someone's life usually plays out in those kinds of psychological ways. And I can speak from that. For example, growing up, I have to say my experience might not be like the majority of, people who stutter, but I felt like I had a great childhood. I really did not let my speech impediment hold me back from social situations or having friends or friend groups. I was not really made fun of for my stutter. I was made fun of for other stuff, but not my stutter. So I never let that really hold me back. But internally, I definitely had self-image issues because of my stutter. And it showed up in other assets of my life, later on.
Okay, Nicole, in your bio, you mentioned that you never fully participated in formal speech therapy until the mid when you're around in your 30s. Would you like to elaborate on that for our listeners?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I discovered I stuttered when I was about 6 years old. I was at a family friend's party, and a child commented on my speech. And so I went to my mom and I said, they're saying my speech is weird or something. And I could tell by her reaction, she kind of knew. So she kind of explained to me what it was. And fortunately for me, in my family, we do have someone who stutters. So my parents were aware of it, and they knew about it, and they knew that it wasn't something that could hold somebody back either. And so they never were worried about me in that sense. So after that, my mom felt like, okay, he's interested in kind of, seeking treatment. So then we went to our public school system, and I got enrolled. Unfortunately for me, the program got cut less than a quarter through, and we never had a speech therapy service offered in my school until high school. And so I didn't seek treatment after that. And then in high school, I tried to get involved closer to like a graduation, because I kind of felt like, okay, I haven't really got a hold of this yet. And I was afraid that it was going to bleed into like other aspects of my life. And so I tried to participate because I was so close to, ending my school career, I could tell that services offered were not really placing an importance on me. There were other students with other issues, and so I kind of quit. Went on to college. I met my wife, got married, had kids, and last year, as my daughter turned 2 and was starting to talk, I started to get these thoughts and ideas in my head that, wow, there's like one day where she's going to recognize that I don't speak like everybody else. And how is she going to approach me, and how am I going to feel about that? And that was extremely hard for me. And talking with my wife, it started to affect me in other areas. And she's like, I think you really need to talk about this. And so luckily I was able to find and connect with Speech IRL in Chicago. And so I joined earlier this year. And after my 3rd session, I found out that they were no longer going to accept health insurance. And so I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? Because I just first started to feel really good about treatment, and I was heading in a really good direction. So luckily the head of the organization said, okay, reach out to SSA and try to apply for a scholarship. And so ended up talking to Jenny, and now I'm here, and SSA has me on, and I ended up joining as the COO for the organization. So.
Wonderful. It's wonderful. Thanks, Nicole. Be- Before I put Jenny on the spot here, I'm going to ask Nathan one quick question. Nathan, when you applied for medical school, were there any questions asked about your stuttering? Because I'm sure our listeners would like to
Yeah.
inquire about that or listen.
Yeah. So definitely. I had written about my stuttering in my personal statement, and obviously they could see that a lot of my time outside of classes was spent on activities stuttering related. So it would have been very hard to hide, even if I wanted to. But so around that time, I was applying in the fall of 2020, and that's when Brayden Harrington's interview came, and President Biden was running for office, and stuttering was taking a national limelight. So for the first time in my life, I didn't have to explain what stuttering was actually to interviewers. So it made that national attention actually made it a lot easier for me to be open about it. And I think generally I got a pretty good reception from interviewers when I was open about it, and it was definitely the most open I had ever been about it in any application in my life. So it was inspiring to me to try to be a little bit more open about my stuttering, even outside of all the work, just trying to share that part of myself a bit more. So I had no problem with the application process because I articulated in my essay that the reason why I want to become a physician is to connect with people's stories and change their lives and provide a service that can really help them and their family. And the big reason why I got this love of stories, of service, of people was really because I battled with my stutter for a long time. This was before, obviously, I had accepted it, and now my stutter is my best friend. But back then, I was battling with it for a long time, and it was always curious that nobody on the outside, my peers, my teachers, administrators, like nobody knew that I was going through this battle because I was a covert stutterer, right? I would take every opportunity to not speak.
Mm.
So that made me think, I'm sure every one of us is going through something, right? It doesn't have to be a stutter. It can be a family trauma. It can be a family illness. It can, everyone kind of has their own story, right? Everyone has something that they are going through. And these stories are very powerful because I never had one person ask, hey, are you okay? Not one. Until high school, a couple of my friends, they said, hey, like, we like you for you. We don't care that you stutter. So that was very impactful for me. And then so it wasn't a problem in the med school process, but I will say that right now in medical school, I interact with a lot of different physicians when I'm in the hospital, and there's a lot of high pressure environments. So it's another learning process for me. Is this something I mention at the beginning every single time? Because I have good days, just like everybody. I have good days, and I have other days where I'm less fluent, and that's not a problem, right? It's who I am. But when I'm on the wards, I have seen quizzical looks from patients, physicians, nurses, and that sort. So that's the next page of my journey, figuring out how much, how often, because I'm totally fine mentioning it and talking about it. It's not that I know people want to know, but just figuring out that rhythm and frequency, and what I'm comfortable with in medical school. So it's been an exciting journey for sure.
Kind of to piggyback on there, I never disclosed this throughout my healthcare career at all. And in fact, in the beginning, like when I was in clinicals and talking to patients, my preceptors were actually saying, wow, patients are actually opening up to you more than our other classmates. And so I kind of used that, throughout my career.
It's really a blessing in many ways, right, stuttering. And it's taken me a while to realize it, but it's awesome.
So, Nicole, when you started your career, so you actually didn't disclose, but it was quite evident that you stuttered.
I believe during presentations and stuff, yes. Nobody ever questioned me though, in college, in school, at work. Nobody ever had a conversation with me about my speech.
Okay. So now, Jenny, I'm going to put you on the spot for a while.
Okay.
So, Jenny, in your bio, you actually talked and praised the significance of the alliance, the Stuttering Social Alliance. You really focus a lot on the alliance. Would you like to elaborate a little more about that?
Yes. I've been thinking a lot recently, actually, about a couple quotes that have really stuck with me. And I think they touch upon that alliance aspect that I've always been so drawn to. We have a partner, SLP, named Rivki Suskind, who's also a person who stutters. And we were talking recently, and she said, the stuttering experience is a microcosm of the human experience. And that simple statement blew my mind. I feel there's a lot of truth in that. And obviously we've all heard of Brené Brown, who does a lot of research about the human experience, and she doesn't talk about stuttering at all. But with this idea that stuttering really is, in my mind, a microcosm of the human experience, Brené has talked about the difference, and in fact how they can often stand in stark opposition of fitting in as opposed to belonging. And Brené describes fitting in as assessing a situation and becoming who you need to be accepted. That is definitely how I spent the first half of my life. Counter to that, she defines belonging as being accepted for who you are. And that if you can prioritize belonging to yourself over any group. And, as social creatures, of course, we all want to belong to a group. That is evolutionarily how we developed. And I think the alliance aspect of SSA is it's a group where many of us who may have felt like we've been contorting to fit in, it's a place where we just belong for who we are. And it's really powerful to feel that as part of SSA and then get to start to create more spheres of your life where you have that same dynamic. It's like an incubator for learning how to belong to yourself in the world.
One thing that I'm learning from SSA and the community is that it often feels like an isolated situation to have a stutter, but the more that we talk about it, you start to realize that a lot of us have the same exact experiences and thoughts, and that is empowering. It really is.
Oh, definitely, Nicole, definitely. Jenny, you also mentioned in your bio that, and this is brand new for me as well, that the arts therapy group helped you to distinguish between the problem of stuttering and active stuttering, and I'm not familiar with that. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, this was a huge breakthrough for me. I might be phrasing it differently than other people would, but for 25 years ish of my life, I would have described stuttering as this external force, certainly not identifying it as a core part of me and my identity. It's this pesky, powerful thing that is constantly just getting in my way from where I need to go and who I want to be. And the act of stuttering, like when I stuttered, felt one and the same as the problem that stuttering was creating in my life. I figured I would never rise above the problem of stuttering as long as I continued to stutter. They were enmeshed ideas. Through arts, avoidance reduction therapy for stuttering, I came to understand through a lot of watching people ahead of me in this group therapy, ahead of me on the path. Oh, the problem of stuttering is my reaction to it, my feelings about it, my anticipating and projecting feelings that other people might have about it. Because I'll never really know what other people think, but I can spend all day creating problems in my life by projecting that they must be thinking horrible things. And if I could learn to accept that, I'm a person who stutters, it's not an external force on my life, it's part of who I am. And that I can stutter and I don't have to wait for this fantasy panacea of a time when I'm fluent to get out from under the problem of stuttering. I can stutter and not have it be a problem in my life. And I'm still working toward it not being a problem ever in my mind. But I mean, I'm 98% of the way down the path. I would have named it as the number one problem in my life for a quarter of a century. And the difference is not that I don't stutter. The difference is that I changed my attitude and my identity. Does that make sense to you, Greg?
Well, it certainly does. It certainly does. Thank you very much, Jenny. Now, I have lots of more questions about your lived experiences, but we will save that for the next episode. But we'll move on to questions about the SSA. Okay. Nathan, I look looked at your website, and I'm very impressed with the SSA website. It's very clean. It's very clear and everything. It is nicely set up. But when was the SSA established?
Yeah.
And a little bit about its history.
Yeah, sure. So we were officially incorporated in 2017, but our operations has started
Okay.
in 2018. So it's been about 4 years. Um, and so, as I mentioned earlier, all of us have this lived experience of stuttering. And the goal of the organization, it came out of that time very early on for me in college, where I went to numerous events in the stuttering community, and it blew my mind. Just interacting at national conferences and local support group chapters, things like that, just interacting with people who stutter from all walks of life. And that there were people who stutter who were happy to be people who stutter. Like back then, I thought that was crazy, right? And now I obviously feel that way. And then hearing about these different support resources available um, across speech therapy from speech therapists who have that training in stuttering, across support groups and workshops and online communities and forums for people who stutter. As Jenny mentioned, it was all about a sense of belonging. And then when I came back to school after these conferences, I always thought how it was a shame that it seemed like these solutions were still hard to access, right? And that nobody was tackling that bridge problem. That these solutions existed in the world, but at the time I heard about them, I was 18. Why did it take me 18 years to find that out? And that was a real question for me. And so I started this organization, Stuttering Scholarship Alliance, because we were primarily focused on that problem of access. And we felt like it was an area that was largely underserved. And for a long time, our primary objective has been twofold. It's a quote from one of our core team members who isn't here, Nicole, and Jenny is laughing because I say it every time, and I think it just encapsulates, as to say, it's we prepare people who stutter for the world and prepare the world for people who stutter. So if you take that first part, preparing people who stutter for the world, connecting them with speech therapy, right? Helpful speech therapy, if that's what they want. And what's the main barrier to speech therapy? Oftentimes is financial. So we have historically provided scholarships to help people who stutter to access that therapy. And we formed a network of specialists who are able to provide that service. We also prepare people who stutter for the world by connecting them with a larger community to engender that sense of belonging that is so important to the stuttering experience. And now, in terms of preparing the world for people who stutter, what we realize is that a big problem why this access issue still remains is because broader society still has a lot of room for improvement in terms of creating a better space for our community. And so we have our amazing volunteers who tackle that side of it by speaking with schools, by hosting workshops, by bringing in speakers who stutter, who talk to us about their lived experience. A lot of these volunteers are future therapists who want to learn, who want to engage. So that dual mission of, again, preparing people who stutter for the world and preparing the world for people who stutter is what SSA has always been about. And recently, over the past couple months, we have been experiencing a slight expansion where we are now looking for ways to use technology to continue to improve this access obstacle. So how can we ensure that every person who stutters, regardless of where they come from, has access to these solutions that can help them to transform their quality of life? And that's the real mission.
Mm. Nathan, this this is the first time I've heard this statement: preparing people who study for the world and preparing the world for people who study. I mean that is an awesome statement. It really is. And would that be your slogan, or is it? Are you going to work with that?
It's
This is
basically a
great.
slogan,
Yeah.
and I have to give the credit to Nicole, who is our head of our community outreach committee, and she's a amazing about to graduate SLP grad student who came up with that, and it perfectly encapsulates our organization and
Oh,
everything that we stand for.
definitely. I mean, this is a feel good slogan for people who stutter. It really is. It's
Yeah.
also powerful because I mean, the more I think of it, it's gives gives me a sense of, I guess, control, hope, and things like that. But it's quite positive. Now, looking at your website, I thought, you have so many staff, board members, volunteer. Like how did you bring these people together? Like Jenny, like Nicole. I mean, this is an awesome, and only being 4 years old. I mean, I thought it may have been older, but you know, how
uh,
did all this happen? And where did all this money come from? I'm starting to think there's something suspicious here with all this money. Just joking, of course.
yeah. Well, I think it really comes from a sense of belonging, um, and the fact that when I talk to people about this mission I want to serve, and oftentimes they have a shared experience, and this happened with both Jenny and Nikhil, who are amazing, and we have connected on this experience. And so after that, it's really up to them whether they are willing to put their time and their trust in this crazy 23-year-old, right? That's what I always say. So the expansion with the board and the volunteers has just been about sharing my story and my belief of wanting to make this world better for people who stutter. And what I found is that if you build an organization that's trying to do good and trying to do good the right way in an underserved area, that transparency, honesty, and humility are ways to get everybody on the ship to go to the promised land. I definitely can't do it alone, and I am very humbled by the fact that all of those people who you mentioned have chosen to join our mission, especially these two who you have right here. But we do have a long way to go as well.
Yeah, and I'll let Nathan speak on how he's fundraised and connected with some of the more well-known people like Dr. McGuire. But just in the case of Nikhil and I got an email from some of his volunteers through my speech therapy email group. So it was just like, hey, there's this cool organization. Contact this guy, Nathan, if you want to volunteer. So I just started talking with him. And then with Nikhil, I think it's really cool. As he said, his speech therapy practice was moving away from accepting insurance. So we met Nikhil he applied for a scholarship. We do Zoom touch points with each scholarship person a few times as they go through their scholarship. And so on the intro call, Nikhil was like, I'm really interested in helping and I have X, Y, and Z skills. And so
Mm.
certainly no scholarship is ever contingent on any payback. So it's not like you have to come and do sweat labor, sweat equity. But in Nikhil's case, it's like, okay, well, he got the scholarship, and then he also wanted to help. And how empowering and amazing is that? That, I mean, who knows in the end, but my guess is like his work with SSA will be equally as impactful on his stuttering journey as his speech therapy, because it's just so transformative to be doing this with people who really understand you. And so I just think Nikhil's story is a cool one too. How like we're open to all hands on deck. You want a scholarship and you want to help too? Great. You know, the more the merrier.
The thing is that call wasn't even part of the treatment. It was just I wanted to reach out to the organization that actually was helping me. So it was a thank you call, and I talked with her, and I was like, wow, we connected so well. And I'm like, I kind of want to turn this into a job interview if I could do so, because I was just so impressed by what the organization was doing and capturing. And then when I talked to Nathan, I mean, how can you not be impressed by him? And if you talk to anybody in SSA, they can tell you that they first heard his story and they were already like, okay, I am with him. And like he says he's 23, he's young. No, like Nathan has a quality that CEOs, founders have. He is going to make this work. And I truly 100% believe that. And I'm just here to try and help them along the way with doing that.
And then just really quickly, another area where we get a lot of volunteer help is from these aspiring SLPs. Yeah. So these are, we advertise over email to undergrad and grad programs where aspiring SLPs are studying. And many of them might come on just to help pad their resume at the beginning, but the ones who stick, which is a lot of them, and really get immersed in our community are going to be these really powerful, fluent people, SLP allies out in the world who are going to know so much more about the lived experience of stuttering firsthand from people, from forming relationships with people who stutter. And it's just going to be such an asset to future clients. And I love that aspect of our impact as well.
Does the SSA have like assigned roles, responsibilities, and like for board members, like are they in charge of web design, fundraising, administration? Would Jenny, would that fall under your job responsibilities being the ED?
Yeah, I've seen startup culture in the for-profit world through my husband's job. And so I would say startup culture in the nonprofit sector is very similar in that it's all hands on deck. People are trading hats, and we're always trying to iterate to optimize like who is great at what, and trying to keep people focusing on where they can have the most impact. So Nathan sort of managed everything and had these volunteers. Then I came on a year ago in April 21 as he was about to go to medical school. I tried to take over a lot of it. He still maintained like the conduit to the board. Fundraising is one of his major talents that I don't share. But I was operational wise holding it all down. I felt like I wasn't doing as great a job with the hours in the day I had. Passed some work back onto him, and then we met Nikhil. He's got all these skills where I don't have, and so we're finding our way to a division of labor that's making a lot of sense, but it's been very fluid.
do you have like terms like well you actually does NLSA sorry SSA have have a board with terms? Do you have a set up board? You do have a board, okay.
Yeah, we there was a smaller board when I came on. One of the first things Nathan and I did together last spring was to build out the board and grow it. We wanted all people who stutter, which doesn't have to be the case always, but it's how we wanted to start. People with different skill sets, and yes, we have board officers like treasurer and secretary and stuff. They have terms. We have bylaws. I mean, it's, if the IRS ever wants to look into it, we are functioning properly as a nonprofit as defined in the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada.
Yeah, and so the SSA provides scholarships to people who stutter and for speech language pathologists. Now, what would be the Nicole, when when you went through the process? I'm trying to say now, if people apply for scholarships, is it very involved? Is it challenging for somebody to
No,
apply?
not at all. So the SLP at Speech IRL, she sent me a form, and it was an online form, and I submitted it to SSA. As soon as I hit send, I would say one day afterwards, Jenny sent me an email, and she was like, "Oh, I connected with something that you had in our application. Okay, it's under review, and then we'll get back to you." And I would say within that week, I got the confirmation that I had been accepted. It was a very easy process.
And Jenny, for the speech language pathologists, we in Newfoundland we have public and private speech language pathologists. Public, they have their, I mean, private, they have their own practice, and the public, they work for the school system, the government. Does SSA distinguish? Like, do you have public and private applying for scholarships, or is that challenged?
In the States, we have mostly private practice SLPs, and we are partnered currently exclusively with people in private practice. On top of that, they specialize in stuttering and either treat primarily people who stutter or exclusively stutterers. Our version of public would be, like school SLPs, which all of our public schools, although in Nikhil's case, it sounds like it got pulled from the budget. Ideally, all of our public schools have SLPs. We have not partnered with them. It's a little more complicated to get involved with school systems. B, obviously, we wouldn't need to partner with them in terms of giving scholarships, because if a student is at a school and they qualify for speech therapy, then they are entitled to it and they don't have to pay. But there's definitely, as we grow our network of people who are passionate about talking about stuttering, normalizing stuttering, and trying to get the lived experience of people who stutter to be more part of public discourse, all of those are great reasons why in the future we can grow to partner with public schools. It wouldn't have to mean an exchange of money, but an exchange of ideas.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does SSA award scholarships outside of speech language pathologists and people who study? Do you also provide scholarships for other areas? I'm not too sure what you would.
No. Nathan, would you like to elaborate? I mean, we just stick to what the mission is.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh. There's a saying in business, like, keep the main thing, right? A big part of and exactly, a big part of running any organization is prioritizing and the value, the focus, and our focus is on helping people who stutter with access to support services. So for that reason, we have not been branching out thus far beyond that.
What what role now, like does families, families of successful candidates like Nicole here, are families involved? Is there a role for them to play within SSA?
Well, we would love, we feel the strongest way that you can support people is through a supportive community. And so that would definitely not only be people who stutter, it's the people who are in their lives. So an easy first answer to that question is, if the scholarship is going to a minor, so a child before the age of 18, we end up developing good relationships with their parents and encouraging them to continue to be part of our online community. In the case of adult clients, as people get more comfortable embodying that identity of a person who stutters and more comfortable being in an online room with lots of people who stutter, they are more than welcome to bring their spouses or parents or kids or anyone to join the conversation. And we don't at this time have like a systematic way that we do that, but the door is never closed to family members.
Okay, good to hear. Now this, this is a $64 question here, and I think that Nathan and Jenny may be able to answer this. Not for profits and charities want a piece of the same available government, foundation, corporate grant pie. We're all applying for the same, just to get a piece of that pie. So the funding pie. So Nathan and Jenny, how does SAH address this challenge? Because we're all applying for available grants, and there's so many charities and not-for-profits.
Yeah. So I think one thing to mention first is that I don't see it as a competition, right? Every organization is great, every charity is great, and oftentimes there are opportunities to work together to try to obtain funding. And so finding opportunities for mutually beneficial collaboration is always a plus. In terms of our own funding structure, so the second point, the availability of government grants for charities in stuttering, I think, might be a little bit less frequent than in Canada. I don't know for sure, but I will say that generally where we get our money from is a lot of private foundations, high net worth individuals, and individual donations. And so as a result of that, the pitch I always make in fundraising is we try to find opportunities, grants, foundations that are aligned with our mission of access, because every foundation is different. Some foundations want to support technology solutions, others focused on racial justice issues. We prioritize looking for those foundations that are concerned about the fact that there is help out there and people are not getting access to it. The official term is like systems-based delivery solutions. So by kind of staying in our niche right? And the fact that this is the problem that we want to solve, right? We're not researching stuttering, technically, right? We're not offering support groups, technically, or camps for kids who stutter. So we target different resources, and I think there's plenty out there for all of us. It's just identifying that niche and finding opportunities to work together.
Okay, great. That's good. Now, before we close tonight, I mean, we've actually gone beyond the hour, but thanks, thanks a lot. But one last question is that reading your bios and now having a clear a clear understanding about how much how busy I mean the three of you are how much like how do you take care of yourself, self care, do the three of you sleep at all?
Since I was a resident, I've been used to being on 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and I've continued that practice throughout my life. I got my hour and a half in the gym this morning. That's my cup of coffee every day. So
Great.
My answer is kind of the opposite. As I really embody like belonging to myself as a person who stutters and everything else about myself, I am growing more aware of my boundaries and what I am capable of giving and doing while still maintaining mental and physical health and the balance. I do have a husband who has a job that demands a lot of him, and we have 2 kids. And so I've just been practicing communicating like what I'm able to do and how often, and then being okay with that. And that's why it's been extra great to have the team continue to grow, because then I don't have to feel as guilty.
Makes sense. Share the workload, in other words.
Yeah.
How about you, mate, Nathan? How do you self care?
Yeah. So this is a big.
Do you?
I definitely do. This is a big area of focus for myself and us as an executive team. I really want and continue to push for all of us to prioritize our mental, physical, or spiritual like well-being, because we can't give all of us to a cause unless we take care of ourselves. But that looks different for different people. I could never do what like Nikhil does and sleep 5 hours. Like I'm the type of guy where if I sleep 7, I'll be very tired. Like I need 8. So I can't do that, right? But I think awareness and understanding my body, also understanding my obligations. That unlike my 2 coworkers, Nikhil and Jenny, I don't have like small kids or young kids. So exactly. I don't have.
Oh, that's cute. Hi, kids.
Exactly. I don't have those same obligations, and so, being aware of that fact, and trying to make time for myself and my work, what I enjoy doing, is probably kind of all I can ask for at this point in my life. But at some point in 10 years, 15 years, like that balance will look different, right? And we just have to continue to adapt with time. So understanding that all of us are at different life stages, not only with life, but also with stuttering as well, right? So it's always a journey. In terms of specifics, so I meditate a lot. I go on runs, exercising. I try to eat healthy. Like we really are like what we put into our body. I've realized that over the past few years, and then sleeping 8 hours is necessary for me. So I hope that helps.
Oh, for sure, yeah. No, I mean, I, as a person who stutters, I've started to ask this question more and more because a lot of people who stutter are so caught up within the survival mode, the survival mentality that just getting through the daily experience, of talking, communicating, that that many people and many people are not aware that they need to self care, just step off this treadmill of the stuttering mentality. So so I feel the more that I ask the more that I ask this question from our guests, this may help other listeners who who stutter to actually think about more about self care because it is so important to find that
Yeah.
Yeah.
balance. You know what I mean?
Can I just add, this sort of feels analogous to me as like prizing or worshiping fluency. In our capitalist society, like, we can all definitely admire a Nathan who, I mean, he never even mentions really went on our calls that he's in school. We'll be on calls and other students will be like, oh, it's exams, I'm tired. He really is capable of a lot in a 24-hour period. But rather than idolizing that like fluency, just broadening the definition of normal would be a healthier way to approach it. And like, I have a healthy admiration for him, but I don't, like, I know I don't have his nervous system and stamina, and that's okay. Like, I can show up in the world as who I am and make different contributions. And it does remind me of the like worshiping fluency, but no, you don't, you can admire it sometimes and be like, wow, I wish I was fluent, but still celebrate what you're bringing to the world.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Am I the fluency in this analogy? That's funny.
Oh,
That's funny. I don't think I've ever been called fluent, so that's very
One
funny.
thing I do
That's the
want to
first
add
time
in there in terms of like self care that's really helped is that me and my wife are now like openly talking about fears and self reflections now that I am in treatment, because I am sharing that now, and I find that to be extremely healthy for us.
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, one last question before we close is there anything else the you know the you know the three of you would like to share about the stuttering the stuttering alliance? No, the Stuttering Scholarship Alliance. I apologize.
I think
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
this would be a perfect opportunity for us to share about our tech platform that we're working on, Nathan. You want to?
Yeah, Nikhil, do you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, sure. So we're in the midst of working on a revolutionary tech platform that's going to be digital. It's going to be an app for our community that's going to serve as a marketplace to offer community events, a space where our community and advocates can all come together to share about experiences, and as well as offer an avenue to access SLPs right on that app.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So just to elaborate, as I mentioned earlier on, it's all about this idea that stuttering is a journey and that all of us are different, right? Like much like how our self-care journeys are different. And up till now, I think that a lot of the solutions out there for people who stutter are great. but I don't think every solution works for every person who stutters. And so what we are trying to build is to build a marketplace that can bring technology to where people who stutter are, that can understand their preferences and where they are in their journey, and connect them with the appropriate resources. And so we are partnering with speech therapists and stuttering associations all over the world in this goal to, again, enable access to the right support resources at the right time. If anybody who's listening is interested in learning more, definitely reach out to us on our website. We will be happy to chat about it. But we truly believe that we can finally build an equitable technology that can solve this access issue in stuttering and change people's lives.
And I think one of the most important things, and we've talked about this, is that the most important thing that we can do for someone who stutters is connect them with somebody that's maybe further along in that journey. And that's what we're really trying to provide.
Yeah, the journey of being accepting of who they are, not the journey of like counting how fluent they are,
Exactly.
just to be clear.
So true. So true. Well, thank you, thank you very much for joining me and and our Some Stutter Law listeners today. I mean, you and your staff and the volunteers, the team are doing wonderful advocacy work. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us, Greg. This was really incredible.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. I mean, we're just really happy to be here and to speak with you for
Thanks
a little while.
So we will have you back again for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. Anytime.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Some Stutter Law is hosted by Greg O'Grady. It is produced, recorded, and edited by Paul DeDecker, as well as Luca Dinu, who, by the way, wrote this jazzy theme music. Leah Bugden and Alicia Megison command our pages on Instagram and TikTok. Editing assistance was provided by the Labrador Languages Preservation Laboratory, or Labradory, at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. You can listen to or subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and Spotify. Video versions of each episode are found on our YouTube page. Some Stutterla is a production of the Communication Collaborative. Thanks for listening.